Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of Pongoids Rock. My name's Kevin from the Kellogg's. I am your host. Tonight, we had planned on having a bunch of people, but we just got Mike from M.U.G. uh, Mike has been playing music in the Hawaii underground scene since the early to mid 80s, mostly with M.U.G, but with a bunch of other bands as well. So without any further ado, I will go ahead and try to bring him in. And there we go. What's up, Mike? Oh, I have to unmute you. See, like I always forget to unmute people. I think you're unmuted now.
Yeah. Hello, everybody.
So, thanks for being on the program, if you will.
Well, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, so like I was saying in the intro, we had expected to have Gabe, and then Gabe couldn't do it, and then we tried to get Ray, and then Ray couldn't do it. So now it's just me and you, which is totally fine. I'm not complaining.
At least you got somebody.
Right? So, I guess let's start off talking about M.U.G. So, when did M.U.G get started, and who was in the band when it first started going?
Well, M.U.G got started in like 1984. We were a bunch of little metalhead kids that had gotten into punk rock, and we were listening to Suicidal Tendency. We discovered Suicidal Tendencies in like 1985. But we were a little metal band, and they were actually in a band, and I wasn't in a band. And they left their band, and we decided, well, we'll start our own band. We had to change our name because there were other bands that had the names we had, and my brother Gabe actually came up with the name.
So
it was we were trying to think of a band name, and there was a M.U.G root beer sticker on one of our skateboards.
Okay.
And he goes, "Oh, look, M.U.G, Mean Ugly Guys."
and so you guys were around for a while, and in the beginning, you guys kind of like after exploring metal, I guess, sort of got into more of the skate rock sound. You guys were all skaters, right?
Yeah, we kind of abandoned the metal thing because the punk rock thing made actually more sense to the way that we thought. We were individuals, and we liked being individuals, and the punk rock mindset actually fit more with the way we thought than the whole metal thing. So it was easy to embrace that, and being skaters, we got into that. We liked bands like The Faction and Suicidal Tendencies and stuff like that. We just liked the speed. It was like metal but different. And better for us.
It was fast and loose, right? Like,
yeah,
and a little bit more aggressive. Like I feel like metal is as like heavy as it tends to be, tends to lack any sort of like real emotion. You know what I mean? I think punk kind of brings that across a little bit better.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were feeling. It's like this metal stuff's kind of fun, but like the punk, the ideas that bands like any of the punk bands had, and the things they were saying actually fit along with the way we thought. So we're like, well, we like this better.
Yeah.
So we just kind of went that direction.
So who was in the band initially? Yeah.
At first it was just me, Gabe, and Ray.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at first it was just me, Gabe, and Ray, but we wanted, somebody had gotten us a show on Radio Free Hawaii, Monday Night Live. It was the night before, KQH. It was the night before New Year's Eve, 1985. But a little bit before that, we were like, well, we need a singer. So we had a friend who contacted a guy named Matt Dale, or people in the old scene know him as Sod. And he was the lead singer for Sod.
Sod,
so
right.
So he joined our band as the lead singer. and so we did KTOH, and the next evening we did our first live show on New Year's Eve, 1985. I think they called it the Coffee Line or something like that. Right
The
across the
place
street,
by
the coffee
Burger
line.
King. Yeah,
Yeah, the
by
local
Burger King, right?
So that was our first live show, and Matt did 2 live shows with us, and then he left the band, and then so I took over as bassist and vocalist.
Do you remember who you played with at that show?
The I remember Jiff, Justin Fun, which had James Kroll and John Kroll. I don't remember. I think Kevin Carr or Dave Carr or both of them, they might have been in a band, but they had like this wig, like a long hair wig, and they didn't look like themselves. It was just this band, and it was interesting because you had all Sod played that night too, so Matt had to sing twice, and so it's Sod, M.U.G, this other band I don't remember. And we didn't get a flyer or anything, so we didn't know who we were playing with. It just said, "Oh, you're playing this show," so we just played the show, and we ended up playing like late. Like I think after our set, fireworks went off in the little place. Yeah, somebody set off fireworks inside the venue.
Sounds about right for the mid '80s, honestly. So that was your first show. Did you guys start playing regularly after that? And like, what were the bands that were around while you guys were playing, other than the ones you mentioned?
Oh, okay. So, yeah, that was our first show, and our second show was at the same venue. And I still don't remember the bands. Jiff, I think, was on it again. But like some of the early bands that we had played shows with, eventually, like it just over the course of a year, we started playing more shows, and we played shows with bands like Devil Dog, SRO, Disciples of Chaos. There was one band called Stage Dive, who became Broken Man.
Okay.
Yeah, so the guys, Jamie Ketta from Broken Man, he was the guitarist in Sod. Then he did Stage Dive, and then it became Broken Man. But so we there was a band called Skeleton Crew, another band called Skeletones. A lot of those early bands, I think we played with the Wrong a few times.
Yeah.
I think we might have played maybe one show with Hypo Depression. All those old bands, we'd known about them, and I used to, listen to them. Those guys were before us, and they were around when we came around. We were like the new kids.
When I was interviewing Raul from Devil Dog, we sort of started talking about like the bands that like moved from Hawaii and like actually did something. And the only one I could really think of at the time was Cringer. But then I remembered later on that the Wrong also moved to the Bay Area and put out a couple of records actually, and used to play the Gilman Street quite a bit too.
Yeah,
so I went back and
listened to Cringer.
Yeah.
I used to listen to Cringer, and I did a few shows with Lance Hahn. He was, in some of the bands that we did early on, like the shows that we did early on. And I got to know him, and I had bought Cringer's 7-inch, and I used to listen to that, and the one that had Manic Monday in it.
Right.
But there were a lot of bands at that time.
Yeah, I feel like that period, like right before the mid '80s, which is when I sort of started going to shows too. Like all those bands, like that were on that No Place to Play compilation. I keep bringing this up in interviews, but that was kind of my introduction to Hawaii punk music, to be honest, and new wave, I guess. But like all those bands, by the time I had started going to shows, were gone. And I mean, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, I was just agreeing with.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that when I did start going to shows, yeah, most of them were at the back door, a few at Coffee Line, and a few at at Church of the Crossroads were like the first shows that I went to. Most of them at the back door. Um, and it was all the bands that sort of like were around from like the 80s into like even the early 90s, like M.U.G and BYK and SRO and Luau Guys and stuff like that. Okay, so you did Monday Night Live. Sorry, I have like a mosquito in here. You did Monday Night Live, and you started playing shows that first year. What was the reception like towards you guys? Because you guys were all really young at the time too, just based on the pictures I've seen.
We were like 15 years old.
Right. So what was
15-year-old Filipino kids from Kalihi.
what was the reaction like to you guys when you started playing shows, like especially from like the older bands that you were playing with?
Some of the older guys, we got to meet them and stuff like that, and we just talked. But then there were so many people in the scene that you can't talk to everybody, but eventually you do. But I think people started accepting us in the scene because we played, we would just play and whatever. But it was like from 85 to 86, we played more shows, and people got used to our sound and whatever, and so we people ended up liking what we did,
right?
But at some point I had a habit of I took it upon myself to go, well, to get people to dance, you just got to make them dance. So I launched myself into the crowd.
Right.
So I just threw myself into the crowd and tried to get people going. I figured, want them to dance, make them dance. You gotta give 100%.
That's right. Yeah, it's all about like just the energy, right? Like that's what makes it fun. So you guys were skaters. So how did you discover the skinhead thing?
That actually happened with the Cro-Mags, Major Quarrel, that album. So while we were still in high school, that album came out, and we started doing Hard Times in our set. And I wasn't a skinhead at that time. It was just something we loved this album. We liked the message that the band had to say, but a lot of the old guys in the scene became skinheads. And then all of a sudden M.U.G had this following of like punks and skins and all these other types of people. There was just a bunch of people that liked to come out and watch us play, and it didn't matter who you were. You just came out if you liked our band, and that's how it was. But the skinhead thing kept growing.
Yeah.
So I think it started with the Cro-Mags. At least for me, it was. It was Hard Times. Yeah.
By the time I started going to shows, there were probably more skinheads at shows than there were like just regular punk kids.
And there was a lot of things going on because right about that time, it was 1988, 1989, around when the backdoor thing happened. But at that time in America, you had Geraldo had gotten his nose broken on live television, and you had the Nazi skinheads coming out of the woodwork and whatever. So in Hawaii, it was just a thing that some of the punks just gravitated toward the skinhead thing, and I know I did. And it wasn't anything like we all said, well, let's become skinheads or whatever. It just happened.
Yeah.
But
so you think it was mostly a reaction then to like sort of the white power knuckleheads coming out of the woodwork in the 80s? Do you think that was mostly it in Hawaii? Like Hawaii seems like a weird place to be a breeding ground for like skinheads of any sort, let alone, like anti-racist skinheads. But it was weird because I mean, that's what I remember about my childhood, was there being like a huge skinhead presence. And then like, there were little grommet kids like me who were like, like on the sidelines, sort of into ska and kind of discovering that, but also like just mostly a punk rock kid, you know?
Yeah, and it was I think there were several different things happening with the skinhead thing because when we had taken a break in 1988, but when we came back, um, we had a ska song in our set,
Hmm.
and we were listening to ska. But ska had been around in Hawaii. A lot of people used to listen to ska, like the skaters. Actually, I got
Hmm.
introduced to ska by Sean Speedy Lopez from Radio Free Hawaii.
Hmm.
He's my friend from Farrington. He introduced me to the Specials, and of course, we had all seen Madness videos on MTV, like you know, House of Fun and stuff like that. But the
Right.
ska thing kind of happened around that time with bands like the Toasters and Operation Ivy, and
Hmm.
so uh, that was kind of tied in with the whole skinhead uh, thing happening with a lot more skinheads coming about because we were all listening to ska, and
Hmm.
we were all listening to Oi and stuff too. And
Right.
it's to me, it's all just part of a bigger scene. Uh, in general, I mean, because if you look
Yeah.
at places like England and stuff like that, they have like those mixed scenes, and a lot of the
Sure.
Oi albums have punks in them, and they go back to like 1980 and stuff like that. So
Right. Yeah.
I think it was just a continuous thing. It's something that we all kind of just discovered. I don't know if it was reactionary for me. What was reactionary
Hmm.
to the white power thing at that time was harsh.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about
You
Harsh.
know,
So Harsh was a huge presence going to those early shows because yeah, like it was mostly skinheads, and I feel like everybody that was sort of a local skinhead was a part of Harsh. Harsh, for people who don't know, was Hawaii anti-racist skinheads. Their slogan was "Punks and Skins United," which leads me to a question though, because being a young punk rocker and kind of on the outside of like I don't want to say I was on the outside of the scene, but I hung with a very specific group of like very punk rock kids. Like we were always a little bit intimidated by Harsh because there were numbers, right? And there were a few certain people who I probably won't mention specifically that used to cause trouble with us, um,
okay.
who were definitely a part of that. But let's talk about the beginning of Harsh. So who started that? How did that get become something in Hawaii?
Um, see who started that. I think it
Wait,
was
your audio's cutting out. Your
okay.
audio's cutting out, Mike. Um, Let me see. Try talking.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't have any audio from you right now.
Oh no.
Let's see.
Does that work?
Yeah, something's going on with the audio at the moment. Um, Mike, you want to try backing out and coming back in, and I'll just put
Okay,
up
yeah.
the card for a second.
Yeah, I can do that. Okay.
Sorry, guys, technical difficulties.
Can you hear me now?
I still can't hear you. I wonder if it's just me. Hold on just a sec.
Okay. I can hear you. Yeah, I can't hear you now. Hello? Yeah, I can't hear you.
Okay. So I don't know if anybody can hear me.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Jesus Christ. Yeah, this third-party app thing is weird. I wish Facebook Live would actually like let me have more than one person in an interview. That's the only reason I haven't been using it, because sometimes there'll be more than one person.
Oh,
Um,
I understand.
anyway, so we were talking about Harsh. So how did Harsh get started?
I don't know. It was like, actually, I think the first meeting that happened, M.U.G was playing someone's birthday party in Kaneohe. So
Okay.
there was a meeting that happened, and there's someone said, "Yeah, we're forming this group called Harsh, Hawaii's Anti-Racist Skinheads, Punks and Skins United." I was like, "Oh, that cool or whatever." But I couldn't go to the first meeting, or Ray and I couldn't go because we had to play some girl's birthday party in Kaneohe. And it was maybe like a week or two before we actually had a meeting and stuff like that, but the idea behind Harsh was uh to be like a Hawaii type of version of Shark.
Mhm.
And it at least for me, it was um to counter the whole uh Nazi skinhead thing, the racist skinhead thing. And believe it or not, there were racist skinheads in Hawaii.
Most of the military, right? Like I remember going to
Yeah.
a few shows and like military dudes showing up and Zeke Heiling and shit like that. Which, like balls on people. Like, I mean, was it a regular occurrence? Like, I mean, was there a real struggle to keep like Hawaii's punk scene anti-racist?
Excuse me.
Was
No.
there?
The whole Harsh thing, uh, kind of, uh, was part of this idea I had, even before I became a skinhead, about having a united scene, like, of individuals, not everybody, you know, uh, uh, being into one thing, but like just having a united scene of different people. So about that time, MUG shows had metalheads, skaters, surfers, um, girls,
Yeah.
women in the pit. I mean, to me that was exciting because you'd never seen that. And
Right.
so I like I I was influenced by 7 Seconds and their whole walk together, rock
Right.
together thing.
Uh,
And I kind of like the idea of having a united scene of outcasts. you know, Punk
right.
rockers are outcasts and we're individuals. And I thought, well, that's kind of a cool idea to have all these people, and that would include skinheads and Rastafarians, just anybody.
Mhm.
If you grooved on the music, then cool, just join in, hop along. So,
Yeah.
for me, the Harsh thing, I like the idea of Harsh because of the whole Punks and Skins United. And we did have punk rockers in the group.
Mhm.
And, you know, um, but they seem to hang out with us more than, like, because I knew there were other punk kids and stuff like that. I
Mhm.
didn't know them all. But for me, it's kind of weird too, because I was meeting all kinds of people.
Right. Right. I think both you and your brother, like, I probably met you in the early 90s officially, but I think both of you, like, were relatively outgoing and easily approachable. Um,
Well,
and I think maybe there were a few people who weren't. Um,
yeah. And for me, I try to be approachable, because I had this philosophy. It's I'm in this band, okay, but I'm not. I might be on a stage sometimes, but I'm not separate from you. I'm just
Right.
another one of, I'm just another person that loves punk rock or oi or ska, whatever. And
Mm.
we're part of the same thing. So why should I distance myself from you just because I'm in a band?
Right.
And I thought it was important for me to, if we're playing with these other bands, why not make friends with them? And the people that come to the shows,
Mm.
I thought were important because I wouldn't be doing what I was doing if these people didn't come to see me play.
Right.
So I thought it was important for me at least to go, hey, thank you for coming to the show. Who are you? What's your name? Maybe we
Mm.
can hang out sometime. Whatever. That's the mindset that I had.
Yeah.
I just thought, well, you're coming to my show, and so that's cool.
Yeah,
Maybe
and I
we can
think,
be friends. United scene.
right. And I think that makes sense because when I was interviewing Raul, he had mentioned that the scene previous had been really cliquey. Like, you had groups from like the Windward side that, wouldn't hang out with the groups from Leeward side. And, like you would have like the high school kids that wouldn't hang out with like the kids that, were older or whatever. And what I remember about the backdoor shows was that, and I was young. I was in 7th or 8th grade. Um, you know, it was really intimidating at first. Like you go through that crazy hole in the wall, and like you're in this big scary room with all these people like moshing and shit, and you're like, oh my god, like what the fuck is this? But at the same time, like everybody, like there were all different stripes there, really.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, like I feel like the skinheads, there were so many of them that like there was such a huge presence. But then you had people like, Bruce who would like pick up people, stand in the middle of the pit and pick
I
people up,
remember him.
yeah, and things like that. But the back door wasn't around very much longer. Like after, I started going to shows, I feel like it was there for 2 years and then it was gone.
Yeah,
So
and that was a lot of venues throughout
yeah,
the whole history of at least my history playing live in Hawaii. I mean, in the early days, sometimes we didn't have places to play. We played
right,
in an Ala Park once.
nice, yeah, yeah.
But it was like, well, we can get the guy that owned Cobra Skateboards, he's like, yeah, we'll have a show here. We're like, okay,
Mhm.
but we had places like Queen Theater. There was
Right.
a place called the Sub Club in Waikiki.
Hmm.
But a lot of places we couldn't play very long. We had this thing like there were some venues that wouldn't let us play
Yeah.
because of the people that came to the shows.
Right. Right. Sub Club was crazy because it was mostly a hair metal club, right? And
um,
it was 21 plus, right? But I
yeah,
remember going
at
there,
some point, yeah.
and
I
I
I
had
know
to have
when
been
I
like,
played there only once. Yeah, I played there only once, and there were no metalheads that time.
yeah.
Yeah,
And that was a really small room too. Like you walk
yeah,
downstairs, and it was probably about the size of, I guess, the first C5, right? It was kind of like that small room,
yeah,
kind of. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, my recollection of like the shows happening at that place were always like glam rock bands and stuff during the early to
Oh,
mid '80s, I guess, mid to late '80s, I guess. Um, so yeah, so Backdoor closes, and Backdoor was kind of like the place to go see bands, other than the occasional thing that would happen at Church of the Crossroads or whatever,
right.
or a coffee line, which ended up becoming a YMCA or the other way around or something.
Yeah.
So what happened after the back door? So were you guys still playing after the
Um,
club was down, and where were the shows happening once the back door?
um, After the back door, we actually didn't really do any shows, and
Mhm.
we actually tried to record our first demo.
Okay, yeah, let's talk
So
about that. So I had sort of talked with you earlier. So you guys didn't record earlier on outside of the K2H thing. You also recorded some tracks live from the back door off the board. And then so after the back door, you tried to actually record a demo. And how did that happen and who was involved?
So that the people in the band, was me and Ray, and Gabe had rejoined the band, and it was Ryan Kunimura.
Right.
And I don't know why we decided, because before we had never thought about recording a demo, which is weird, because we never said, "Well, we need to record." It was just all about playing shows.
Right.
And that's all we did. And then after the back door closed, we're like, well, let's try and record a demo. So Willie Fruin from BYK, he was the one that set us up. We went to some studio in I think past Pearl City or whatever, but he had the equipment to record us, and he actually recorded like our first rough tracks, but nothing happened after that because I left the island shortly after.
Okay.
A few months after recording the demo. So pretty much M.U.G broke up because I left and I moved to Portland.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what happened.
I didn't remember you moving to Portland that early on. Did you and Gabe both leave, or was it just you?
No, it's just me. I left in summer of '93, and we had recorded our demo like late '92.
Right.
And so we had recorded the demo, but I think we were getting around to going back in and trying to, touch stuff up, re-record stuff and whatever. But then I left. It was just like this thing. I went, well, I'm going to move to Portland.
Yeah.
So, but kind of shot myself in the foot and, ruined it for everybody else because, we were recording this demo and then I split.
Right.
So I felt kind of bad about that because it's just like, well, we were trying to do something and then I just took off.
So what did the rest of M.U.G then do after you left? Did any of them?
What happened was I get this letter from, I can't remember if it was Nos or Gabe or Ray or maybe all three of them, but they're saying, oh yeah, we're going to open up for the Butthole Surfers. Right. Okay. And I'm like, oh, cool. And they're like, but since you're not in the band, we're not going to call it M.U.G. But the flyer they sent me was they were calling themselves Stink Boto. And so they open up for the Butthole Surfers, and I think they open up for Bad Religion too. I can't remember. Maybe I might be wrong about Bad Religion. But then they changed their name to the Pongoids.
Right. I don't remember Butthole Surfers playing, but I definitely remember Bad Religion playing a few times.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they said something about, but I remember seeing this flyer and it said Stink Boto. I'm like, oh, okay, But then they formed the Pongoids,
right?
And it was basically all the guys in M.U.G, including Warren, but with Nos singing, and they were doing some M.U.G songs and a bunch of other songs. I don't know what they were. And when I came back in '94. Instead of reforming M.U.G, at some point I just joined the Pongoids.
Okay, but then you ended up eventually bringing M.U.G back into existence, right?
Yeah, and I remember what happened. How that happened too. That was there was a one-off thing when the Queers came to Hawaii.
Okay.
Gabe came running out of the club and he's like, hey, how about like you, me and Ray, like, somebody asked if like M.U.G could play. And he came out and he's like, yeah, just me, you and Ray, just go up and do a couple songs or a few songs or whatever. I'm like, well, we got to talk to Ray about it. We can't just make this decision. We're a band. We've always been that way. So we all agree, and then we go in the club, and so we play a few songs, and I don't remember any of the words. It's funny because I didn't remember any of the words, and I had people singing back to me, and I'm like, I can't. So I just screamed.
Yeah.
But and then it was after that, it was like, well, people were like, well, can M.U.G play this show and this show and that show? I mean, there was that band Scared of Chaka that played. We opened up, we played with them with the Raymonds, the Power Pellets, Unit 101.
So I put together that.
I love
I
Unit
put
101.
together that show, and I put together that them coming to Hawaii. Actually, like they had written to me to get a show in Hawaii because they were going to Japan or something, and then I was gone while they were there, and they were so pissed off at me for like, because I had to go back to San Diego for something, and Scared of Jocko were like super pissed. They were like, "What? You're not even here to like help promote the show, and like, there's hardly anybody here," and like, it was like a huge deal. But I also remember the queer show, and I think I feel like it may have been like one of the guys from Hell Yeah Bowlers that asked you guys to play, because I put on that show too.
Yeah.
And,
I don't remember
and I think
who asked.
Came to me and was like, "Hey, can M.U.G play?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess."
Yeah, I don't know who asked. All I know is my brother came running out of the club, and he's like, "Hey, someone's asking if we can play." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'll do it if we can get Ray on board." Because for the most part, like Gabe has been in the band, sometimes and whatever, and sometimes not. But whatever incarnation of M.U.G, whatever decisions we made, a lot of the times it was like, well, me and Ray would have to consult each other because, we were the constants, stuff like that. So it was, as far as a core unit, it was always like me and Ray and Gabe, and other people, everybody made a contribution to the band.
Yeah.
And, they were all good contributions. But Ray and I were always the constant. So I was like, well, I can't agree to do this show without him saying yes or no, And so that's how it happened, And then, like, when after the queer show, other people asked us if we could do other shows. And so we did. It was kind of fun, but it's kind of weird because we went back to doing our set like half originals and half covers. Which is how we first did our very first live show.
Yeah, me and Willie kind of talked about the agnostic front version of Crucified versus the original version of Crucified. Like, it was always the agnostic front version that everybody played because it was faster, I guess.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, I watched your interview with Willie. I'm like, that's correct. I mean, most people wanted to play the agnostic version because it was faster.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever did that song though.
Yeah. So while M.U.G was sort of making a comeback and started playing shows again in like the early to mid 90s, weren't you also then starting a band with Les, right?
Yeah.
Around that time?
Yeah.
Crawling Chaos?
Yeah.
Right?
I actually, yeah, it was around that time, and I actually started 3 different bands.
Okay.
So, yes, I was in a band. Les and I started the, at least as far as we know, the first satanic punk rock band.
Right.
And that was our thing. It was like, we had a horror punk theme, but we were pro Satanism.
Yeah.
And and because of who he was and who I was and stuff, and that was our main idea, was to have this horror punk type band with overt elements of Satanism, the satanic philosophy infused in the songs and stuff.
Right.
But Les wrote
and
most
that's
of the
something
songs. He only wrote 3 songs.
Les wrote most of the songs for every band that he was ever in. Like that guy just churned out stuff. Like, it was crazy, right?
Yeah.
What I was going to say was that, so you kind of got heavily into the Church of Satan kind of stuff. Gabe got heavily into the Hare Krishna religion. And like, what was that like? I mean, like two very conflicting philosophies. Like, did you as brothers like come to heads on some of that stuff like ever?
Oh,
Like,
oh no, not of course not. Because what it was is it's just that you have your thing, I have mine.
mm,
And the whole Satanism thing, it's actually been a part of my life for a really long time. It's just I never said anything about it. I keep
yeah, yeah,
certain things private or whatever. And when I got with Les, it was like, well, it's like coming out. It's like, okay, well, yeah, actually, I'm a Satanist.
yeah,
Before that, it was just like, well, it doesn't matter to you or anybody. It's what I do. It's a personal thing. So, when Gabe got into the Hare Krishna thing, I never said it,
right, right.
because that's what he wanted to do and whatever, you know. And so we never clashed about, different religious points of views or beliefs or whatever, you know.
Mm.
Because to
Um,
me, it's all about individuality, and so you're an individual, and so am I. So, you know, it's still a
right,
punk rock mindset.
right. Yeah, yeah, and I mean, it should be like all walks of life, right? I mean, that's what punk
Right.
rock was meant to be about, like the outcast. Um,
Yeah.
so you were doing Crawling Chaos. What were the other bands that you were doing at the time?
So uh I started the Pugilist with Ray Bala, and
Right.
that was an interesting thing, because the idea with that was we were going to do an OI project, and it
Mm.
was supposed to be just a project. That's how I projected the projected the idea was we were gonna start this OI project, and him and I were gonna write the songs, and then I had this idea. Well, let's get different people from different bands to do like guest vocals, guest guitar work or whatever, and do this project. And then Damon, Mark, and Jeff Schmolak, they come back from San Francisco, and they go, we hear you guys have this Oi band, so we want to join the band. And they show up. We set up practice, and we become the Pugilists.
Yeah, and the
And so
Pugilists actually were relatively like a huge band. Like it seemed like that band came together really quickly and got tight really quickly. Um,
yeah, and it was fire. It
yeah,
was fire from the beginning, from the get go. It's like they came back, and we said, well, here's this. One person would go, well, I have this, and then I would go, I have this. And every practice it was total fire. I
yeah,
mean, like almost every practice we'd write maybe a song or two,
right.
and
And,
like
and that band
we
actually did record, right?
yes, yeah. Actually, so the Pugilist did record, and so did Crawling Chaos.
Mm.
So both bands that I was in, we recorded. And the Pugilist became something that was uh unexpected for me, because I had a different idea, and it was like, well, this is better.
Yeah, yeah,
And it was well received. The band was well received. I mean, we're skinheads, but and the some of the uh, way that people thought about skinheads um, was a little different. And so when the Pugilist played, everybody was dancing and having a good time and stuff. And I was like, well, this is really cool, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah.
and
I
then
think
the other
I think the
band
Pugilists.
that
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh yeah, so the other band that I started around the same time was Omnicide. And
Right,
it was the guys from Hell Yeah Bolos, Raph and Rolo, and the Morse
right,
Brothers and stuff. And so we started Omnicide, which was a black metal, death metal fusion with hardcore.
right, right.
And uh, Eric Humphreys was the lead singer. And so we tried to do that because it was something different. I mean,
Yeah,
and it was different. It was a weird mixture, but it worked.
yeah. Yeah,
And
I remember
I
that
was
band being really good too. And did you guys change members kind of frequently? Like, I feel like there were a few different guitar players, maybe.
on the side. No,
Yeah.
actually, on the side, we didn't change members at all.
Okay.
You know, Yeah, it was the same band that we started with, and when I left, it was, Omnicide uh, broke up, but the Pugilist continued after I left.
Right, right.
Yeah,
And so
so
then, how did you end
uh,
up leaving the second time, and what was that about? And
um, just different things. A lot of it had to do with uh, working a job
mm,
that wouldn't give me a raise for being. I was there for years, most of the '90s, and my boss would always try to get the higher ups to give me a raise or whatever. So I'm like, I can't do this. I need to like live. I need more money and whatever. And I thought, well, if I left, maybe I can get a better life.
right,
And that was the whole reason. It wasn't anything bad or anything like that. No animosity between anybody, whatever. It was just, well, I wanted to have a different life,
yeah,
and just kind of move on. I would have loved to have keep playing music, and actually, when Les had moved shortly after, and we were going to continue crawling chaos
right,
up here, but that didn't work. And that happens.
yeah. So I, you moved to Port. Did you have family ties in Portland? Because you went there twice.
No, I didn't move. The second time I left, I actually moved to Washington.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, I moved to
did
Olympia.
Les, okay, right. And did Les initially move to Washington too? He was in Seattle, right?
Yeah, he initially moved to Olympia, then he moved to Seattle before he went back home.
Right, because I remember the catalogs sort of got back together
Hmm.
because Justin was also there,
Right.
um, and a few other people, and that's when they recorded their 7-inch.
Right.
So you tried to do Crawling Chaos on the mainland for a while, and then that didn't really work out, or Les moved back, or
Um, it I didn't have an instrument for one thing,
mm,
and and this thing happened to me that kind of bugged me for like the last 20 years or whatever. Is
mm,
when I moved here, I couldn't write music.
mm,
Like all of a sudden, I couldn't compose a song. I couldn't write any lyrics or anything like that, and it's been that way for a really long time. And only recently, I just started writing, composing bits of uh, music here and there. It sounds like acoustic punk, but I don't have an
yeah,
electric guitar, but you know,
yeah. I think maybe I don't know if this is true for you, but I know it has been for me that I find it hard to start playing music with people nowadays because there just isn't that kind of camaraderie that I would have had with like people that I grew up with that made it
that's
easy. That
yeah,
you could bounce things off of easy. Like now, I feel like if I tried to start a band, I would have to like answer an ad in a classified, meet like an entirely
right.
new group of people, and hope that it works. But I feel like back home, like it was easy. Like you got your friends together, whether they knew how to play or not, and you just made a band. I think some of the best bands in Hawaii, that's sort of how they happened. Was
Yeah,
you had groups of friends, and I especially think like into the late '90s, early 2000s, the bands that came out from that era, a lot of them were much younger and like just learning to play their instruments, but like created like amazing things
yeah.
that takes sort of like that young naivete to be able to like create. Um,
Or teen angst.
right, that as well.
And for me, like the whole history of M.U.G, the songwriting usually happened right in the practice room.
You're right, exactly.
It was uh and it was a weird thing because like uh with like Ray Bala, I could sit there and just like play a riff, and he'll be like, "Wait, play that again." And
Mm.
then in like 5 minutes, we'd have a new song.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I mean,
know,
that's
and
how
it
a lot of the catalog songs came together too. It was just like that.
yeah,
You know, we were sitting in a room and like Les would play a riff and then Justin would hop on it and then I would hop on it. And yeah, those songs came together in days, you know, and you know, it was easier to like make a band and, you know, have 20 songs before you played or something because it was all your friends and, you know, like it was all a good time. It didn't feel like work, I guess, maybe.
Right. I remember early on in M.U.G, we'd have to split up our set because there was one point we had written 30 songs. And so what we do is whatever show we play, we'd split them up so we can have about maybe 15 songs, but rearrange the order every time, except for the instrumental that we'd always start off with. But we'd have to rearrange the songs because we had written so many songs, but a lot of them were under like 3 minutes too. So you know, but that's how it was in the early days with M.U.G. is you go in and you'd have these ideas and we'd already have lyrics written, and we just go in the practice room and somebody would, you know, do something and be like, okay, well, let's do that. And we'd have a song and we eventually end up with this huge list of songs and we'd have to break them up.
Yeah.
You
know. So I know that you recently posted in the group that there would never be an M.U.G reunion. Do you think that's definitely true, and why?
It's partly because distance. We're not together. You know, Ray's back in the islands. Gabe and I are up here in Washington. He lives near Seattle. I live 62 miles south of him. But it's mostly because of distance. And the other thing might be because not being able to write songs. I mean, it's always nice to go back to the classics and stuff like that and play the songs that people know and stuff like that. But it would also be nice to write new material if you could. But that's a hard thing right now. It's like I have trouble composing. I can compose music now, but I'm having trouble with lyrics. Maybe it's I'm not angry anymore. Or something like that. You know, I'm not. You know, I still have this punk rock mindset. Was that?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's there's less to be angry about right now, but there really isn't. Like it's kind of the opposite. There's plenty to be angry about right now.
Oh yeah.
But I think, you know, maybe like having a family and all of that. I know for me, like it's settled me, you know, quite a bit, you know, to have a kid and. Which doesn't mean I'm not going through a major midlife crisis and wishing I was playing music with people too, you know. So so you think that's part of it?
What's that?
Do you think that's part of it for you? Maybe just the family thing?
Yeah, part of it is family, but I actually have the desire to want to play music, and I've several times, you know, I went out and I got a bass amp and stuff like that. And a few years ago, my brother and I actually tried to compose a bunch of what do you call hardcore songs and stuff like that. And I had come up with one riff, and we couldn't get anywhere. And to me, the way I've always been is if you have to actually sit down and try to compose a song, like really try, then that's not going to work because now you're working instead of having fun. You know, it's not passion or anything. You're actually trying to make something happen that doesn't happen naturally. So but then it was kind of like the wrong timing because my youngest daughter was born, and so it was his first girl. They're the same age, and that happened, and we're like, oh well, we got to put this on hold because, you know, we have children now. And so that's how it's been. It's just mostly life happens and dealing with being, you know, the next stage of your life, being adults.
Sure.
And stuff like that. Yeah.
So since you aren't playing music too much right now, what have you been doing to keep yourself busy? I know you were doing some writing as well,
Actually,
and
yeah, actually, uh, so when I wasn't able to write music, the weirdest thing happened was I started writing fiction.
mhm,
And so back in like 2005, I self-published my own dark fantasy magazine, did maybe
mhm,
about 4 issues. And then like in 2012, I self-published a little horror magazine. And
mhm.
so, well, I have these projects, right now I'm writing uh different stories. I have an anthology, like a short stories, vampire short stories, doing that. I write a lot of
Cool,
science fiction. I'm working on a book of monsters,
awesome.
just like a monster. It's supposed to be like a field guide of like
Yeah,
monsters that
yeah,
I created. But and
that's
actually over the weekend, the last 2 weeks, I have been working on music. And so I like one weekend I composed this whole album of like weird ambient experimental music.
rad.
And it's a short album. The album's like the total is like 18 minutes long. But
Uh,
it's like it's a album. It's dedicated to the guy who wrote Who Goes There. It's a science fiction novella
okay,
that John Carpenter's The Thing was based on.
okay,
So uh, um, that's what I'm doing right now. Actually, I mean, this whole last week I've been working on the liner notes, getting the stuff copyrighted, sending out the files and whatever. So actually have been working on music, and that's what I'm doing right now.
that's super cool.
Is
It's like
it's
you're like the local Brian Eno or something.
well, here's what that's kind of funny, but this is how I think about it. If you have talent, at least for me, if you have
Mm,
talent, there's going to be some way that you're going to utilize that talent. You're going to do something, even if it's not what you originally did, but some way,
right.
somehow, you're going to create something. And at least for me, it's like I feel like, well, if I have the ability to create, which is visual art, writing stories, and making music, at some point, I'm going to have to create
Yeah,
because of that's who I am. That's how
right,
M.U.G. That's how I always saw M.U.G. and any of the other bands. It's like, well, I can play music, so I have to play music
right.
because that's in my blood. It's not going to go away. It's in my blood, so I have to do this. But once I started not being able to hear music in my head, this new thing happened, and I started writing stories, like horror
Mm,
stories, short stories, and so that became my thing. I've always been a visual artist, so I actually produced like a little art book of diabolical artwork, like
ah,
devil women, devil girls, and
yeah,
little weird stuff like that. I actually released that like in 2009 or something like that. So
cool.
I've been doing stuff, not as much as I'd like to. Like I really really would like to get back to playing punk
Yeah,
or something. Uh, one
yeah.
of the desires I had was to play something like Motorhead style punk,
Nice. Well,
like Motorhead mixed with like punk and oi or whatever.
yeah, and I think that kind of brings us to a good closing point because we're almost at an hour. And I've been ending these interviews asking because I'm a record collector. Like what's the record that probably has been timeless for you? Like what's the record that you still listen to and you still feel like yeah, that's why I got into this.
The first Suicidal Tendencies album, the very
That's
first one, the
awesome.
one with Subliminal. That's the
Right.
one that like got me into really got me into punk, and that's like the timeless one. I mean, I always listen to that. I like some of their other stuff, but it's like, well, no. this is the one. It's
Yeah.
Suicidal Tendencies. Yeah.
It's funny. I was in a record store, and I rarely actually go into record stores these days. But I was in one of the local record shops, and he actually had a bunch of cassettes because I've started buying those recently too. Like I have space for any of that. But he had like all the Cramps stuff on cassette, and then he had the first Suicidal. He had the first Suicidal record. I was like, I thought, like, I sat there and I looked at it for a while, and I was like, should I buy it? Like, will I listen to it? Do I really need to have it? But I ended up buying it just because, like, like it's like that from that formative era, like for me, like, like even when I was first getting into punk, like obviously the first thing you're gonna hear is like, in the 80s anyway, it was the Sex Pistols, it was, the Cramps, Suicidal, MDC, and like Corrosion of Conformity. Like for me, like those were
a huge MDC fan.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy about them too is that they came to Hawaii. They came to Hawaii, and that was like
they came to Hawaii. I met the bass player guy or whatever.
Yeah, it was like probably right before I started going. Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, man, like it was really cool seeing you. Really cool talking to you again. It's been a good like 10 years or so. And I appreciate you doing this.
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, I like what you're doing. I like the idea of doing these interviews with all the, Hawaii bands and stuff. Cause, Hawaii has this scene that people don't really know about. I mean, Maximum Rock and Roll maybe had like 2 or 3 scene reviews.
I think there were 2
of the Hawaii scene.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think we were mentioned with one of them, but most people don't think about Hawaii as having this scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's been around since the early 80s, like even before.
Yeah. I mean, and like we've talked about this before, I feel like the underground music scene, the underground rock scene in Hawaii goes back to the 60s, and like some of that stuff like is completely under people's radar, and was just as like heavy and like, like naive as some of the stuff that came out in the 70s and 80s for sure. And I want to cover all of it. I want to cover all of it, and like part of doing this series is like definitely like the archival part of it, for me. Like that's just kind of like who I am as a person. Like I really enjoy like the act of like collecting music and collecting like memories and collecting stories, right. For me that's what makes it.
But it's no different than collecting records back in the 80s. I mean,
right.
All of us that collected records, we did it like voraciously. Head down to Jellies and or Tar Records and get whatever we could.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of us have like huge record collections.
Because it's not like bands were coming through like, every weekend that you could go see. Like the only way you could hear music was to like go buy a record blindly and hope that it was good. And I think for me, that's why I started collecting records, was because I just wanted to hear more and more stuff. And the only way to do it was just to like start, mail ordering stuff, or like, going to Jellies and seeing what was in the bins. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's how I discovered mostly everything that I still like today. So.
Yeah. And the one thing I liked about the Hawaii bands is like, well, nobody's coming through here, so let's make our own stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Let's make our own scene. And that's how it was. It was do it yourself. And the bands put on their own shows or whatever, or sometimes people like Maury would or whatever, or people in the scene in general. It's like, well, I want these bands to play, so I'm going to get this venue, or they can play at my house for my birthday.
Right.
And then these bands play, and that's how you get these shows. And it's, I like that, because it's total do-it-yourself.
Yeah. And I think,
that's the reason why everything I've done since then is do it yourself, because I've always thought that way.
Yeah. We didn't have a choice, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. I appreciate you again coming on the show, and I appreciate you watching the programs I've done so far.
Of course. I want to know. I mean, it's great to see all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I know some of these people, so You gotta support your friends, right?
Right, and I appreciate it, man. All right, dude.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on, and we'll catch up again real soon.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.